How should we respond to the news that Donald Trump, of course, eventually got coronavirus? He has, as Brett said, been doing everything one would do if you wanted to get coronavirus. So how should we express our feelings, our reactions to it? How much empathy should we have? How much sympathy should we express? Are we allowed to say certain things? Now, first off, there are some people who are being incredibly responsible and admirable and also in line with their character in this regard. Joe Biden tweeted, "Jill and I send our thoughts to President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump for a swift recovery. We will continue to pray for the health and safety of the president and his family." That is a very nice, very presidential thing that Joe Biden did. But if you don't do that, are you a bad person? Is there something wrong with you if you perhaps pay a little bit of attention to the full context of who Donald Trump is, how he has talked about the pandemic, even up to and including this week, how he's talked about people getting diseases in the past? I'm gonna run you through a bit of that context in just a moment, but Brett, I know that this is something you've been thinking about. So briefly, where do you come down on this so far?
On what specifically?
On the conversation about how you're allowed or should express yourself, considering everything attached to the door.
I mean, my take on it is, I mean, everyone has their own moral code, and I know that everyone also has their instincts, and then they have to deal with what their, the difference between what their instincts are on how to react, which they don't have control over, and the way they present which they do have control over, unless they're inebriated, in which case they're just gonna tell you what they feel. So if it is the case that you really want to spike the football here, my take is someone else already has. And already people like Kevin Hassett Trump's economic advisor, are going on Fox and are saying essentially like, I hate how the Democrats are out there spiking the football. There's not really a moral play there for them. They're essentially celebrating that Donald Trump is sick. And I gotta say, all right, so if there was one person who did that, they'd pretend like everyone is.
Of course.
I think the decent thing to do is say thoughts and prayers with the president. I hope he has a speedy recovery, and then immediately pivot to all the times he's been the absolute worst person, saying that Obama should go hug Ebola patients. And then also all the times he said stuff like, I like people who weren't captured. So Trump has never taken a moment to hold up and decide what the decent thing to do is.
Trump can't see the high ground.
Yeah, he can't see it, and I'm not gonna take the low ground, but I would point that out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I'm not gonna celebrate. My Twitter activity has been, I would say, quite restrained considering how his has been. But I'm not gonna ignore the context and I'm not gonna pretend that it's not there. And so I am gonna remind people of some of it, as you just alluded to. So we just read you Joe Biden's tweet wishing a speedy recovery to Trump and to Melania. Joe doesn't want them to suffer. I'm sure that if he could press a button and take away their disease, he would, because he doesn't want them to deal with a fatal illness. You know who didn't extend them that same courtesy necessarily though? Donald Trump, because we found out today that Biden and his campaign didn't find out about Hope Hicks or President Trump testing positive before anyone else. They got it at the same time as us from news reports, despite the fact that it came about 2 full days after the Trump campaign knew that Hope Hicks had the virus, a day more that they suspected she might have it, but they didn't say anything about it. They were willing to let Joe Biden maybe just begin to have the disease spread through his body, because it would hurt them PR-wise to let anyone know, even if it maybe kills his rival. And not just his rival, by the way, because despite all that they knew about Hope Hicks and the possibility that other people had been affected, didn't necessarily change Trump's behavior. The New York Times reports that Trump advisors knew it was likely that Hicks had contracted the coronavirus on Wednesday. After a rally, Hicks reportedly quarantined for the return flight to Washington on Air Force One, and on Thursday, a test officially confirmed that she had it. The White House, however, hoped it could keep her diagnosis from becoming public, Trump aides told the Times. It's hard to overstate how closely Hicks worked with the president and how intertwined their days reportedly are. Instead of taking precautions to protect those around him though, Trump basically did nothing different. This is after they knew. Instead of laying low, he traveled. Instead of isolating, he met with people at campaign events. Instead of protecting those around him, he knowingly risked spreading the virus further, including in supposedly socially distanced but indoor maskless round table fundraisers after he had every reason to believe he had been exposed to the virus, but didn't yet know whether he had it. He continued to knowingly potentially spread it to his high dollar donors. He was still doing that. And not just that, they're freaking out now. GOP donors freaking out after coming close to Trump at fundraisers hours before his positive test, because he couldn't wait a few hours before meeting with people to find out whether he had it or not. And there's the added context of the fact that his entire family basically didn't wear masks during the debate this week, breaking the venue's rules and potentially spreading it to more people. You gotta deal with that.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.